I'm Camille, 30 years old, and last week my father called me crying. The first time in my entire life I'd ever heard him cry. 2 years ago, I called my parents in tears. Having just received a stage 3 cancer diagnosis, my dad said one sentence that I will never forget. 6 months of chemotherapy, 36 trips to the hospital, not a single visit from my family. They were too busy planning my brother's wedding. Now my father needs me. And my answer was exactly 4 words. Before I continue, if you end up liking the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with it. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back 2 years to the day I got the call from my doctor. I was a senior graphic designer at a mid-sized agency in Boston. The kind of place with exposed brick walls, too many succulents, and an espresso machine that cost more than my first car. I loved my job. I was good at it. I'd clawed my way up from intern to senior designer in 5 years, no help from anyone. My apartment was a 1-bedroom in Somerville, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I had a monstera plant on the windowsill that I'd kept alive for 3 years, which felt like a minor miracle. I had a routine. Coffee at 6:30, gym 3 times a week, dinner with my friend Harper on Thursdays. That Wednesday started like any other. I was in the middle of a campaign for a big client. Some fintech startup with a deadline that made my eye twitch. My laptop was open, Slack notifications pinging every 30 seconds when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I was in the zone, the creative flow. But something made me pick up. "Miss Atwood, this is Dr. Patterson's office. We have your biopsy results." I remember the exact temperature of my coffee, lukewarm, because I'd forgotten about it for an hour. I remember the way the afternoon light hit the glass partition of the conference room. I remember thinking, biopsy results shouldn't come with this tone of voice. "The results are back," the nurse continued. "Dr. Patterson would like you to come in tomorrow morning. Can you be here at 8 a.m.? My Starbucks cup sat untouched for the rest of the day. I didn't taste anything at dinner that night. I just kept thinking, they don't call you in for good news. "The next morning, doctor." Patterson didn't waste time. "Stage 3 breast cancer," she said, her voice gentle but clinical. "The tumor is aggressive. We need to start treatment immediately." I sat in that sterile office with its framed diplomas and artificial peace lily, and I felt my body leave the chair like I was watching myself from somewhere near the ceiling. A woman in her 20s still wearing the blazer she'd put on for work, hearing words that belonged in someone else's life. "Ms. Atwood Camille." I blinked. "Sorry." Yes, I'm here. "Do you have someone who can drive you home?" I thought about calling Harper, but it was barely 9 a.m., and she had a shift at the hospital. My coworkers were acquaintances, not friends. And then, without thinking, I said, "I'll call my dad." Here's what you need to understand about my family. My father, Richard Atwood, was the kind of man who believed his word was law. Not in a cartoon villain way, in that quiet, immovable way that makes everyone around him adjust their lives to accommodate his opinions. When I was growing up, we didn't argue with Dad. We didn't question Dad. We just did what Dad said. And despite everything, despite the years of feeling second best, I still reached for him in that moment. Because that's what daughters do, isn't it? When the world falls apart, you call your father. I walked out of the oncologist's office, found a bench in the hallway, and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to tap his contact. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Camille, what is it?" "I'm in the middle of something. I should back up. Let me explain the Atwood family hierarchy. My brother Derek is 2 years younger than me, but you'd never know it by the way our parents treated us. Derek was the son. I was background radiation. Derek got a full ride to Boston College, not because he earned a scholarship, but because Dad wrote the check without blinking. I got told that girls don't need expensive degrees and took out $87,000 in student loans for a state school. When Derek got his first job, Dad threw a party. When I got promoted to senior designer, Mom texted me a thumbs-up emoji. Derek had just gotten engaged to Megan, a perfectly pleasant woman with perfectly highlighted hair and a perfectly boring job in HR. The wedding was set for October, 4 months away, and it had consumed my family like a black hole consuming light. Every conversation was about the wedding. Every family dinner was wedding planning. My mother had a Pinterest board with 847 pins. "Dad," I said into the phone, my voice cracking. "I just came from the doctor. I have cancer. Stage 3. Silence. I waited. I could hear him breathing. Somewhere in the background, I heard my mother's voice asking who was calling. Dad, did you hear me? More silence. Then, I need to tell you something. He finally said about that doctor's appointment. We're going to need to talk about this later. But he didn't say later. He said something else. Around that time, I started keeping screenshots of our text conversations. I told myself it was just to remember things. Chemo brain is real, and I was terrified of forgetting important details. But maybe part of me already knew I'd need proof someday. Dad, I have cancer, I repeated slower this time, like maybe he hadn't understood. The doctor says it's stage 3. I need to start chemotherapy right away. I'm really scared. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face in that hospital hallway. A nurse walked by and gave me a pitying look. I turned toward the wall, phone pressed against my ear, waiting for my father to say the words I needed to hear. Come home. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone. Instead, I got silence. 5 seconds, 10. Then Camille, listen. Your mother and I. We can't deal with this right now. I stopped breathing. Your brother is planning his wedding. Do you understand? The wedding is in 4 months and there's so much to do. We can't take this on right now. Dad, you're a strong girl. You've always been independent. You'll figure it out. His voice hardened the way it always did when he wanted to end a conversation. I have to go. Derek and Megan are coming over to finalize the venue deposit. The line went dead. I sat on that bench for 45 minutes. People walked past, doctors, nurses, patients, families. Nobody stopped. I was just another person in a hallway having the kind of day that splits your life into before and after. I wanted to call back. I wanted to scream, "Your daughter might be dying." I wanted to say, "A wedding is one day. Cancer is every day for the rest of whatever time I have left." But I didn't say anything. I just screenshot the call log. 8:47 a.m., duration 2 minutes 31 seconds, and added it to a folder I titled Family. That was the last time I called my father for 2 years. The first day of chemotherapy, I drove myself to the hospital. The infusion center was on the 4th floor, a room full of reclining chairs arranged in a semicircle, each one equipped with an IV stand and a small television mounted on an adjustable arm. It looked like a spa designed by someone who'd only read about spas in medical journals. I checked in, signed forms, and was assigned to chair 7. The nurse, a kind woman named Rita with reading glasses on a beaded chain, accessed my port and started the drip. "First time?" she asked. I nodded. "It's okay to be nervous, honey. Most people bring someone with them." I looked around the room. She was right. Chair 3 had a woman whose husband held her hand the entire session, whispering things that made her smile even as poison dripped into her veins. Chair 5 had a teenager whose mother sat beside him, reading aloud from Harry Potter. Chair 9 had an elderly man whose daughter had brought homemade soup in a thermos. Chair 7 had me, just me. I texted my mother, "Starting chemo today. I'm scared." She replied 6 hours later, after I was already home curled up on my bathroom floor with nausea I wasn't prepared for. "Hang in there, sweetie. Mom's at the florist with Megan picking centerpieces. Pays or roses? What do you think?" I stared at that message for a long time. Then I screenshot it, added it to the folder, and typed back, "Roses are nice." I didn't tell her I'd spent the last hour dry heaving. I didn't tell her that I'd had to pull over twice on the drive home because my vision was blurring. I didn't tell her anything real. What was the point? I met Harper Sullivan during my 3rd chemo session. She was a nurse practitioner who ran a support group for cancer patients, one of those hospital programs that exists because someone wrote a grant proposal about holistic care or patient wellness outcomes. I'd ignored the flyers for 2 weeks until Harper approached me directly. "You're always alone," she said, sitting down in the empty chair next to mine. She had curly red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of direct eye contact that made it hard to lie. "I noticed these things. I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine." She smiled, but it wasn't pitying. It was warm. "I asked why you're always alone." Big difference. I should have brushed her off. I should have said something polite and dismissive, the way I'd learned to handle conversations I didn't want to have. But I was 3 rounds into chemo. My hair was starting to thin, and I hadn't had a real conversation with anyone in weeks. "My family is busy," I said. And then, because something about Harper made honesty feel safe with my brother's wedding. Her expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or anger on my behalf. "When's the wedding?" "October." And when's your last chemo session scheduled? November. She nodded slowly. You know, we keep visitor logs at this hospital. Every patient, every visit, who came to see them, and when. It's mostly for security. But some people request copies later. For their records. For their memories. I didn't understand why she was telling me this. Not then. But I filed it away. And 3 days later I requested my first copy. Derek's wedding was scheduled for October 15th. I was between Chio cycles. The brief window where I felt almost human, where the nausea had faded, but the exhaustion hadn't fully set in. I wasn't planning to go. I hadn't been asked to be in the wedding party, not even as a reader or a candlelighter, but I thought maybe I'd show up, sit in the back, see my family. Then my father called, one of his rare calls. Camille, about the wedding, he started. Your mother and I have been talking. Hope flickered in my chest. Stupid, stubborn hope. We think it's best if you don't attend. The hope died. You understand? He continued as if he were explaining something obvious to a child. You look unwell. You've lost weight. Your hair. He cleared his throat. It's Derek's special day. We don't want anything to overshadow it. Anything meaning me. Overshadow meaning remind everyone that his daughter was fighting for her life while they celebrated centerpieces and seating charts. I understand, I said, and I did. I understood exactly what kind of family I had. The wedding happened without me. I saw the photos on Facebook. My mother's post got 247 likes while I lay in bed recovering from round 4. My father in his Brooks Brothers suit beaming. My mother in champagne silk dabbing her eyes. Derek and Megan, golden and glowing, surrounded by 150 guests who had no idea the groom's sister existed. The caption read, "The happiest day of our family's life." I screenshot it, added it to the folder. Then I closed Facebook and didn't open it again for 6 months. Some things you don't need to see twice. 3 weeks after the wedding, the medical bills started arriving. My insurance covered a lot. Thank God for my company's PO plan, but a lot isn't the same as everything. After deductibles, co-pays, and the medications my plan considered non-formulary, I was looking at $47,000. $47,000 I didn't have. I sold my car. I canceled every subscription. I stopped buying groceries that weren't on sale. And when that still wasn't enough, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do again. I asked my father for help. Dad, I'm in trouble. The medical bills are more than I can handle. Could I borrow some money? I'll pay it back. I stared at that text for 20 minutes before sending it. My finger hovered over the button like it was a detonator. But I was desperate, and desperation makes you forget your pride. His response came 2 hours later. Your mother and I just finished paying for Derek's wedding. We don't have extra right now. Have you looked into a personal loan? Your credit should be good enough. I read it 3 times waiting for a follow-up. A sorry or an I wish we could help or even a we love you. Nothing came $47,000. That was the price of my survival. And my family, who had just spent $80,000 on a wedding for my brother, as Derek had proudly mentioned to relatives, couldn't spare a dime. I screenshot the conversation. I added it to the folder. Then I applied for a personal loan with a 14% interest rate, because what other choice did I have? I'd be paying it off for years, but I'd be alive to do it. At least I hoped I would be. The worst night came after round 4. My oncologist had warned me the cumulative effects of chemo buildup, each round harder than the last. But nothing prepares you for lying on your bathroom floor at 2 a.m. shaking so hard your teeth chatter while your body tries to reject every cell it contains. I lost my hair that night. Not gradually the way it had been going, strand by strand, handful by handful, but all at once. I woke up to a pillow covered in blonde, the hair I'd had since birth, the hair my mother used to braid when I was small. I crawled to the toilet and vomited until there was nothing left. Then I kept vomiting. Anyway, at 2:47 a.m., I called my mother. The phone rang 8 times before going to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail again. Voicemail. At 3:15 a.m., I texted Harper, I think I need help. She showed up at my apartment 40 minutes later, still in scrubs from a late shift. She didn't say anything, just sat with me on the bathroom floor, held back what was left of my hair, and stayed until the sun came up. My mother called back at 10:23 a.m. Sweetie, you called last night. I had my phone on silent. Megan and I were at the spa. Post-wedding stress relief. You know how it is. A pause. What did you need? I looked at Harper, who was making me tea in my tiny kitchen. Then I looked at the bald patches on my head in the bathroom mirror. Nothing, Mom. It was nothing. Oh, good. Well, call any time. Love you. She hung up before I could respond. I screenshot the call log, and I understood finally what family meant. I know a lot of you watching might have been through something similar, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you when you needed them most. If you're nodding right now, drop a me too in the comments. You're not alone. And if you're wondering what happened when my father finally needed me, keep watching, because what comes next, I promise you won't see coming. But first, let me tell you how I survived. 2 years later, I was cancer-free. The day Dr. Patterson told me, no evidence of disease. Camille, you did it. I walked out of her office and cried in the parking garage for an hour. Not sad tears, not even happy tears. Exactly. Just release. 2 years of holding my breath and finally, I could exhale. A lot had changed in those 2 years. I'd been promoted to art director. Turns out staring down your own mortality gives you a clarity that corporate America respects. My boss, Victor Reeves, had kept my position open during treatment, had let me work remotely when I could manage it, had never once made me feel like a burden. You're talented, he said simply when I thanked him. Talent is worth waiting for. I'd moved too. Sold my little Somerville apartment and bought a condo in Beacon Hill. Nothing huge, but it had a window that overlooked the Charles River and enough space for my monstera, which had somehow survived everything I had. I bought myself a navy cashmere scarf to celebrate my 1-year remission. It was the most expensive thing I'd ever owned that wasn't a medical bill. Harper and I were still close, closer than ever. We had dinner every Thursday just like before. But now she felt less like a friend and more like a sister. The sister I'd always wanted. My family, I hadn't seen them in 2 years. We exchanged the bare minimum. A Happy New Year text, a birthday emoji. Nothing real, nothing that mattered. I'd made peace with it. Or at least I'd made a fragile truce. I had a life now. A good life. A life I'd built myself from the ground up. And then my father called. It was a Thursday evening. I was making dinner. Salmon with roasted vegetables because I'd learned to actually cook during chemo when I needed to control exactly what I ate when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years. Dad. I stared at it. The salmon sizzled in the pan. The phone kept buzzing. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, the way I'd learned to let a lot of things go. But something, curiosity maybe, or the masochistic part of me that still wanted to believe, made me answer. Hello, Camille. His voice was different, thin, uncertain. My father had never sounded uncertain in his life. I need to see you. Not how are you? Not, it's been too long. Not, I'm sorry I abandoned you when you had cancer. Just, I need... What's going on, Dad? A long pause. In the background, I heard my mother's voice muffled, asking something I couldn't make out. I've been diagnosed with something. Another pause. Parkinson's disease. Early stage, they say. But he trailed off. I stood in my kitchen. Phone pressed to my ear, waiting for him to continue. The salmon was starting to burn. I didn't move. I need my family around me right now. He finally said, There's a dinner Sunday at the house. Your mother, Derek, and Megan. I want you there. We need to discuss the future. The future? As if I hadn't spent 2 years building a future without him. Okay, I heard myself say, I'll be there. After I hung up, I realized something. In that entire conversation, the first real conversation we'd had in 2 years, he never once asked if I was okay. He didn't even know if I'd survived. I spent the next 2 days oscillating between dread and a dark kind of curiosity. Parkinson's disease. I looked it up because that's what I do now. I research. Early stage Parkinson's isn't a death sentence. It's a slow decline, a gradual loss of control, tremors, stiffness, eventually difficulty walking, talking, swallowing. It requires long-term care. It requires patience. It requires someone willing to put their life on hold. And suddenly I understood why my father had called. Not because he missed me, not because he regretted what he'd done, because he needed something. And I was the logical choice. The daughter without a husband, the daughter without children, the daughter who had always been expected to sacrifice. I called Harper that night. You're going? She asked, her voice careful. I need to know what they want, and I need them to look me in the eye when they ask for it. Cam, I'm not going to let them manipulate me, not anymore. I touched the cashmere scarf hanging by my door, my reminder of everything I'd survived. But I need to face them. Does that make sense? Harper was quiet for a moment. Then you know that folder you've been keeping? The screenshots, the visitor logs? Yeah, bring it just in case. I could hear her choosing her words carefully, not to use, but to remind yourself of the truth if they try to rewrite it. I hadn't opened that folder in months. But that night, I sat on my bed and scrolled through 2 years of evidence. The texts, the call logs, the hospital visitor records with my name at the top, and an empty column where visitors should have been. My family's love story told in documentation. Sunday arrived too quickly. I dressed carefully, not to impress, but to armor. Black slacks, a cream silk blouse. The cashmere scarf draped over my shoulders. I looked successful. I looked healthy. I looked like someone who had built a life without them. Harper texted me before I left. Remember, you don't owe them anything, not a single thing. The drive to Newton took 40 minutes. My parents' house was exactly as I remembered. A white colonial with black shutters, 3 stories, 5 bedrooms, a lawn so manicured it looked artificial. The house I'd grown up in but never belonged to. The house where I'd learned that love came with conditions. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, watching the warm light spill from the dining room windows. I could see figures moving inside. My mother probably setting the table with the good china, the Waterford crystal, the sterling flattiere, all the props of a family that looked perfect from the outside. My phone buzzed. Harper again. You've got this. You survived cancer. You can survive dinner. She was right. I'd face down death. What was a family meal compared to that? I grabbed my purse, inside it, my phone with the folder that contained everything, and walked up the brick pathway to the front door. The doorbell chimed the same 3 notes. It had my whole life. My mother answered, her face arranged in an expression I couldn't quite read. Joy, relief, guilt. Camille. She pulled me into a hug before I could react. She smelled like Chanel No. 5, the same perfume she'd worn to my high school graduation, to Derek's wedding, to every important moment that didn't include me. You look wonderful. Come in. Come in. I stepped inside and braced myself. The dining room hadn't changed in 2 years, or maybe 20. The mahogany table that sat 12, even when there were only 5 of us. The crystal chandelier that my grandmother had brought over from Ireland, or so the story went, the family photos on the wall, arranged chronologically, stopping abruptly around my 18th birthday. I noticed that detail for the first time. The photo timeline. There was Derek's college graduation, Derek's engagement party, Derek's wedding. But me? I was frozen at 18, awkward in a prom dress, smiling at a camera that didn't care. Camille. Derek stood from his seat, ever the golden boy, approaching me with arms spread wide. Behind him, Megan remained seated, one hand resting on her belly, 5 months pregnant, I'd heard through the grapevine. The next generation of Atwood favoritism already in development. Derek. I accepted his hug stiffly. He felt bulkier than I remembered, the softness of a man who didn't have to fight for anything. You look great, really great. His eyes flicked to my hair, grown back finally, though shorter than before. He had the decency not to mention it. And then I saw my father. He sat at the head of the table where he'd always sat. But something was different. He looked smaller, older. His left hand trembled slightly against the white tablecloth, a tremor he was trying to hide but couldn't. His eyes, when they met mine, held something I'd never seen before. Fear. Sit down, Camille. His voice was still commanding, but frayed at the edges. We have a lot to discuss. I took the seat across from Derek, my back straight, my purse beside me on the floor. Inside it, my phone waited. The trap was set. I just wasn't sure yet who it was set for. My mother served dinner. Rack of lamb, roasted potatoes, green beans, almondine, the same meal she made for every important family gathering. We ate in near silence, the scrape of silverware against china, filling the void where conversation should have been. When the plates were cleared, my father stood or tried to. His legs seemed to resist him, and he gripped the table edge for support before finding his footing. I'll get right to it, he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had spent 62 years never being questioned. You all know about my diagnosis, Parkinson's early stage, but it's going to progress. The doctors say I'll need assistance long-term. He let that hang in the air. My mother looked at her hands. Derek shifted in his seat. Megan rubbed her belly. We've discussed it as a family. When was this discussed without me? And we believe the best arrangement is for someone to move back home to help with my care. His eyes landed on me. Camille, you're the obvious choice. I felt the word obvious like a slap. Not best, not preferred, obvious. The leftover child, the one without a husband, without children, without anything important enough to prevent her from being useful. You work from home mostly, don't you? He continued. You don't have a family of your own. I've already had your old room prepared. It's time you came back and contributed to this family. Contributed? As if I'd been lounging around doing nothing while they ignored my cancer. As if the only thing I had to offer was servitude. Derek nodded, not meeting my eyes. It makes sense, Cam. I've got the baby coming. The job, you understand? I looked at my father, his trembling hand, his expectant face, and I smiled. You have a responsibility to this family, Camille. My mother's voice, soft but insistent. The voice she used when she wanted something but was too proper to demand it outright. Your father needs you. I've been working 60-hour weeks, Derek added, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who's never had to justify his existence. And with the baby coming, Megan's going to need my support. I can't be in two places at once. I noticed he said Megan's going to need support. Not that he wanted to be there, just that Megan would need him. A convenient excuse. Megan herself stayed silent, her hands still on her belly, but her eyes were on me. There was something there. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. Like she was watching a play she'd seen before, and knew how it ended. Think about what you're asking, I said quietly. We're not asking. My father's voice hardened. We're telling you what needs to happen. You're the daughter. This is what daughters do. This is what daughters do. The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my pulse quicken, felt the old familiar pressure to comply, to accommodate, to make myself small so everyone else could be comfortable. But that Camille was dead. She had died on a bathroom floor 2 years ago, alone with a phone full of ignored messages, and a family that couldn't be bothered to show up. Before I answer, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. I want to ask you something, Dad. He looked surprised. People didn't ask Richard Atwood questions. They just answered his. When was the last time you asked how I was doing? Silence. When was the last time? I continued. You asked if I was even still alive. The silence stretched. My mother's smile had frozen. Derek was suddenly very interested in his water glass. Even Megan leaned back slightly, as if distancing herself from whatever was about to happen. What are you talking about? My father asked. But his voice had lost some of its edge. I'm asking a simple question. You say I have a responsibility to this family, but when I was sick, really sick, fighting for my life, sick, where was this family? Camille, that's not my mother started. No. I want an answer. I kept my voice calm. I'd spent 2 years learning how to stay calm when everything inside me was screaming. Dad, do you even know if I'm still in remission? Do you know what my last scan showed? Do you know anything about my health at all? Another silence. This one sharper. You're sitting here, I continued, looking perfectly healthy to me. Am I wrong? My father's face shifted. Confusion first, then the beginning of something darker. What do you mean, perfectly healthy? You said you had cancer, Dad. I had stage 3 cancer. I let the word land. I went through 6 months of chemotherapy. I lost my hair. I lost 15 pounds. I spent $47,000 out of pocket because you told me you couldn't help. My father's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in my life, I saw him speechless. And here's the part I need you to understand. I reached for my purse slowly, deliberately. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I'm cancer-free now, 2 years in remission. But you didn't know that, did you? You never asked. I pulled out my phone. You never asked because you didn't care. My father's face had gone pale. My mother was crying now. Silent tears, the kind she always cried when she wanted to look fragile without making a scene. That's not fair, she whispered. We were dealing with the wedding. And the wedding? I nodded slowly. Derek's wedding, which was important enough to plan, important enough to pay $80,000 for. Yes, I heard you bragging to Aunt Linda. But my cancer treatment wasn't important enough to visit. Not once. Not one single time. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Cam, we didn't know it was that serious. I called Dad the day I got my diagnosis. I was crying. I told him I had stage 3 cancer. I looked directly at my father, and you said, and I quote, "We can't deal with this right now. Your brother is planning his wedding." I didn't. My father started. Yes, you did. I unlocked my phone, opened the folder, and placed it face up on the mahogany table. Would you like to see the text messages where you told me you couldn't loan me money for treatment because you just paid for the wedding? Or the call log showing Mom didn't answer when I called her at 2 a.m. because I was too sick to stand? Or maybe you'd like to see my hospital visitor records? I scrolled to the document. Lines and lines of dates, times, and one column that repeated the same word over and over. None. 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 36 hospital visits. I said. 36 chemotherapy sessions, 0 visitors. The room was absolutely silent. Megan's hand had dropped from her belly. She was staring at the phone, then at Derek, then at my parents. Something had shifted in her expression. My mother reached for the phone, then drew her hand back. I didn't, she started, but there was nothing left to say. I slid the phone toward the center of the table. The screen glowed in the soft chandelier light, displaying my hospital visitor log. A document I'd requested 3 times over 2 years. Each time hoping the next page would show a familiar name, and each time being met with emptiness. You can look, I said. All of you. I'm not hiding anything. My mother was the first to reach for it. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through. Months of entries, dates stamped in institutional font, my name at the top like a patient ID number, and that devastating column, visitors. None. 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 I don't understand, she whispered. Why didn't you tell us how serious? I did tell you. I pulled up the screenshots. Here's where I texted you my chemo schedule, and here's where you replied asking about roses versus peas. Here's where I asked Dad for money, and he told me to get a loan. Here's where I called you 23 times over 6 months, and you answered twice. Derek grabbed the phone from my mother, scrolling through the evidence. His face had gone a grayish color I'd never seen before. Megan leaned over his shoulder, reading her jaw tight. Derek shook his head. This can't be right. It's right. I took a breath. Every screenshot is time-stamped. Every visitor log is official hospital documentation. This isn't my opinion, Derek. This is what happened. This is what all of you did. I looked at my father. He hadn't moved. His trembling hand was pressed flat against the table, as if he were trying to steady himself against something more than Parkinson's. I don't need anyone to apologize, I said quietly. I just need you to remember this. Remember it when you ask me what I'm going to do next. If you're thinking, I was too prepared for this, you're right. I was. Because when you've been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, you learn to protect yourself. You learn to keep receipts. You learn that feelings can be denied, but documents can't. Hit that like button if you believe that sometimes the truth is the only weapon you need. And stay with me because my 4 words are coming. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. My mother was crying openly now. Not the performative tears of earlier, but something raw. Her mascara was running, leaving dark tracks down her cheeks. I didn't know, she kept saying. Camille, I didn't know. You knew, Mom. You just chose not to see. Derek was still holding my phone, scrolling back through the screenshots like he was looking for something that would prove them all innocent. He wouldn't find it. My father finally spoke. This is the past. His voice was rough. The authority cracked. What's done is done. What matters now is the present. I'm sick, Camille. I need help. We need to move forward. I almost laughed. Almost. Forward, I repeated. You want to move forward? Yes. Whatever happened then? He waved his trembling hand dismissively, as if my cancer were a minor scheduling conflict. We need to focus on what's happening now. I need a caregiver. You're my daughter. Megan cleared her throat. It was the first sound she'd made in 20 minutes. Richard, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Did you know about any of this? The hospital visits? The money she asked for? My father didn't answer. He knew. The words came from Derek, quiet and horrified. He was looking at a screenshot. The one where my father had told me to get a loan. Dad, you knew it was complicated. My father's composure finally broke. The wedding, the timing. There were considerations. Considerations. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my blouse. There were considerations. I picked up my phone and slipped it back into my purse. My mother reached for my hand. Please, Camille, don't do this. We're family. And there it was, the magic word, family. Family, I said, letting the word hang between us. Let me tell you what family means, Mom. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Family means showing up. Family means answering the phone at 2 a.m. when someone you love is sick and scared. Family means offering to help with medical bills instead of throwing $80,000 at a party. Family means at minimum visiting your daughter in the hospital. Once, just once. My mother's face crumpled. Derek had the decency to look at the floor. I spent 6 months fighting for my life, I continued. 6 months of poison dripping into my veins. 6 months of vomiting and hair loss and terror. And where was my family? I looked at each of them in turn, planning seating charts, tasting wedding cakes, picking out flowers. Camille, my father tried. No. The word came out sharp enough to cut. You don't get to Camille me anymore. I am not your backup plan. I am not the consolation prize. I am not the daughter you call when you need something and ignore when you don't. I grabbed my purse, my scarf, my dignity. You have a son, I said to my father. A son you paid $80,000 for his wedding. A son you've never asked to sacrifice anything. Why don't you ask him to be your caregiver? Derek's head snapped up. I can't. I have responsibilities. So did I. I met his eyes. I had a job. I had a life. I had cancer. And I handled all of it alone because you were all too busy. I started toward the door, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. Behind me, I heard my father's voice broken in a way I'd never heard it before. Camille, please, I'm begging you. I stopped, turned. My father was crying. I'd never seen him cry before. Not when his mother died. Not when Derek broke his collarbone falling off a bike. Not once in 30 years. But now, tears were streaming down his face, his trembling hand wiping at them ineffectually. I'm sorry, he choked out. I know I handled it wrong, but I'm scared, Camille. I'm scared of what's coming. I need you. Please, you're my daughter. For a moment, one brief, treacherous moment, I felt the old pull, the desperate need to be loved, to be wanted, to be enough. The little girl inside me who had spent her whole life trying to earn her father's approval. But that little girl had grown up. She had survived cancer alone. She had rebuilt her life from nothing. She didn't need Richard Atwood's approval anymore. Dad, I said, my voice steady and clear. I hear you, and I understand that you're scared. But there's something I need you to hear. I took one step closer, close enough that he could see my face clearly, close enough that there would be no misunderstanding. 2 years ago, I called you crying. I told you I had cancer. I told you I was terrified. And you know what you said to me? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. You said, we can't deal with this right now. I let the words settle over the room like snow. So here's my answer, Dad. I smiled, not bitter, not angry, just peaceful. I can't deal with this right now. 4 words, the exact same words he'd said to me. My mother gasped. Derek's jaw dropped. My father stared at me, tears still falling as the full weight of what I'd said hit him. I turned and walked out the door. I didn't run. I walked past the family photos that didn't include me, past the crystal chandelier and the mahogany furniture and all the expensive props of a family that looked perfect from the outside. Past my mother who reached for me and then dropped her hand when I didn't slow down. Camille, Derek called from behind me. Camille, wait! I didn't wait. I opened the front door, stepped onto the brick pathway, and kept walking. The cool evening air hit my face like relief. My car was where I'd left it, still parked in the driveway. Waiting behind me, I heard the door open again, footsteps on the pathway, my mother's voice, high and desperate. Please don't do this. We're your family. We love you. I stopped at my car door and turned. Mom, I said gently, family doesn't leave you alone to die. And love isn't something you only offer when you need something in return. Her face crumpled. For a moment, I felt something. Not guilt exactly, but a kind of grief for the mother. She could have been for the relationship we might have had if things were different. Goodbye, Mom. I got in my car, started the engine, adjusted my mirrors. In the rear view, I could see them. My mother standing on the pathway crying. My father in the doorway supported by Derek. Megan behind them all, her hand on her belly watching me go with an expression I couldn't read. I pulled out of the driveway onto the tree-lined street, and I didn't look back, not once. The cashmere scarf was soft against my neck. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt like I could breathe. I was finally free. 1 week later, my mother called. I answered. Not because I owed her anything, but because I was curious, and maybe, just maybe, because some habits die harder than others. Camille. Her voice was tired, older than I remembered. I wanted you to know what's happening here. Okay. Derek has had to take a leave of absence from work. She paused. Your father. His condition is progressing faster than they thought. He needs daily assistance now. Meals, medication reminders, help getting dressed. I listened without commenting. Derek is doing it. He didn't have a choice. With Megan pregnant, they couldn't afford a full-time caregiver, and your father refused to consider a nursing home. Another pause. Derek missed an important project. His supervisor wasn't happy. There's talk that he might be passed over for the promotion he was expecting. I thought about Derek, Golden Boy Derek, who had never been asked to sacrifice anything. Derek, who had an $80,000 wedding paid for while I took out loans for chemo. Derek, who had sat at that table and nodded along when our father demanded I give up my life. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Not for Derek, but for the situation, for the inevitable collision between expectation and reality. Megan is stressed. My mother continued. She didn't sign up for this. They're fighting constantly. She says she stopped herself. She says what? A long sigh. She says she's starting to understand why you left. I let that sit for a moment. Megan? The quiet observer who had watched everything from the sidelines was starting to see. Thanks for telling me, Mom. Will you come back to help? No, I said. But I hope Derek figures it out. I hung up. 3 weeks after the dinner, I received a text from my mother. Just one message, but it was different from anything she'd sent before. Camille, I've been thinking a lot. I owe you an apology. A real one, not an excuse. I should have protected you when you were sick. I should have stood up to your father. I should have been there. I wasn't. And I have to live with that. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what we did. And I'm sorry. I read it 3 times. This was new. My mother had never taken individual responsibility for anything in her life. She existed in the passive voice. Things happened, situations developed, mistakes were made. But here she was saying I should have. I wasn't. I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it for 2 days, turning it over in my mind like a stone in my hand. On the 3rd day, I wrote back. I appreciate you saying that. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I hear you. Her response came almost immediately. That's okay. Whenever you're ready or never. Whatever you need. Whatever you need. 4 words, completely different from the 4 words I'd been given 2 years ago. I showed the messages to Harper over dinner that Thursday. She read them carefully, then looked up at me. How do you feel? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe a little hopeful, but cautious. Very cautious. That's healthy. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You don't owe her forgiveness, Cam, but you're allowed to accept an apology too. I know. I smiled. I'm learning. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. It was handwritten, shaky, uneven, the penmanship of a man whose hands no longer obeyed him. The envelope had my name spelled out in careful, trembling letters. Camille Atwood. I almost didn't open it. I carried it around in my purse for 3 days, taking it out occasionally and putting it back until Harper finally said, "Just read it." The anticipation is worse than whatever's inside. She was right. I opened it on a Thursday evening, sitting alone in my apartment with a glass of wine and my Monstera plant as a witness. Dear Camille, I am not good at this, at apologizing, at admitting when I was wrong. Your mother says it's pride. Maybe she's right. I failed you, not because I didn't know better, but because I made a choice. Your brother's happiness over your survival, and I will have to carry that for the rest of my life. I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve either. I only wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see the daughter I pushed away, and I see the woman she became without me. You are stronger than I ever was. I lost you not because of Parkinson's, but because I wasn't the father you needed. I'm sorry. Those words are not enough. But they are all I have. Your father, if you still allow me that title, Richard. The handwriting wobbled across the page, each letter a small battle against the tremors that would eventually take everything from him. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my drawer. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw it away either. Harper came over the next day. I showed her the letter, the first person I'd shown it to, the first person I trusted enough to see me process something this complicated. She read it slowly, her expression thoughtful. When she finished, She set it down on the coffee table between us. How do you feel? I don't know. I curled my feet underneath me on the couch, sad, I think, for him. For what he's losing. For what we could have had, but not guilty. I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, not guilty. I picked up my wineglass, turned it in my hands. I used to feel guilty for everything. For not being good enough, for not trying hard enough, for not being the daughter he wanted. But I've learned something in the last 2 years. What's that? That some people will never love you the way you need no matter what you do. And that's not your failure, it's theirs. You can't pour yourself empty trying to fill a cup with a hole in the bottom. Harper smiled, her eyes bright. That's pretty wise. I learned it the hard way. I took a sip of wine. I'm not going to rush forgiveness. Maybe I'll get there someday. Maybe I won't. But I'm not going to force it just because he's sick or because it would make things easier for everyone else. And if he gets worse, if he... She didn't finish the sentence. Then I'll deal with it when it happens. But I won't set myself on fire to keep someone else warm. Not anymore. I looked at the letter still sitting on the table. That's my boundary, and I'm allowed to have it. Yes, Harper agreed. You absolutely are. 6 months later, I was still cancer-free. Dr. Patterson had used the word thriving at my last checkup, which seemed too optimistic for someone like me, someone who had learned to brace for impact. But maybe she was right. Maybe I was thriving. I'd been promoted again. Creative director now with an office that had a window overlooking the Boston skyline. My Monstera plant had made the journey with me, thriving in the better light. I'd hired 2 junior designers and discovered that I actually loved mentoring people, guiding them through the challenges I'd faced alone. I was dating someone. His name was James, and he was a high school history teacher with kind eyes and a terrible sense of humor. He knew about my cancer, about my family, about all the ways I'd been broken and rebuilt. He didn't try to fix me. He just showed up consistently, the way people who love you are supposed to. Harper and I still had dinner every Thursday. She'd started dating someone too. A surgeon from her hospital, a woman named Elena, who laughed at all of Harper's bad jokes. We were building a life, all of us together, the family we chose. My mother texted me every few weeks, short messages mostly. Thinking of you, hope you're well. I responded. Sometimes, not always. We weren't close, and maybe we never would be, but we were something, a work in progress. My father's Parkinson's had progressed. He'd finally agreed to a part-time caregiver, paid for out of the retirement fund he'd been hoarding. Derek visited twice a week now, duty, I assumed, not love. But maybe that's all some families have. I hadn't seen them since that dinner. I wasn't sure I ever would again, and I was okay with that. If you're watching this, if you've made it this far, I want to talk to you directly. Maybe you're in the position I was 2 years ago. Maybe you're lying in a hospital bed or sitting in a waiting room or crying in a stairwell because the people who were supposed to love you have made it very clear that you're not their priority. Maybe you're wondering if it's your fault. If you were different, better, easier, less needy, they would show up for you. I spent 28 years believing that. And then I got cancer, and I learned the truth. Some people will not show up no matter what you do. You could be dying, literally dying, and they would still find something more important. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of theirs. Here's what I want you to know. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no to people who only reach out when they need something. You are allowed to build a family out of the people who actually love you, even if they don't share your blood. Forgiveness is a process, not a performance. You don't have to forgive on anyone's timeline, but your own. And if you never forgive, that's your right too. Nobody gets to tell you how to heal. Those 4 words I said to my father, I can't deal with this right now. They weren't revenge, they were a mirror. I held up his own words and let him see what they felt like. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. Tell the truth. And sometimes the truth sets you free. I'm sitting in a coffee shop as I finish this story, my favorite spot, the one with the good lattes and the big windows overlooking the street. It's a Thursday afternoon. Harper will be here in an hour for our weekly dinner. My phone is in my pocket. Inside it, there's still a folder called Family, all those screenshots and visitor logs and evidence of the worst time in my life. I don't look at it much anymore, but I keep it just in case. Outside, the city is moving. People walking, cars honking, life happening. I'm part of it now. Not watching from a hospital bed or hiding in a bathroom, but really living. 4 words changed everything. Not because they were clever or cruel or even satisfying, but because they were true. I'm Camille, 30 years old, cancer survivor, and I've learned something that took me way too long to understand. Family isn't blood. Family is who shows up when you need them most. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who never loved you back. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself. Really, I mean it. If this story resonated with you, here are the lessons I carry with me every day. 1. You don't owe anyone your sacrifice if they weren't there when you needed them. 2. Keeping records isn't about revenge. It's about protecting your own truth when others try to rewrite it. 3. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're self-respect. If you're still here, thank you. That means more than you know. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to set a boundary with family? What happened? And if you want more, check the description. There's another story waiting for you there. Until next time, take care of yourself.